welcome to Mixology, where we launch each episode mixing up a beverage as we discuss how customer education and customer marketing mix together as scale engines to customer success. I'm Kristine Kukich, and along with Shannon Howard, this time we're talking about multi-threading and how that concept plays out at scale. We'll talk about this with a spiced apple fizz. Here's your ingredients: 1.5 ounces of vodka, half an ounce of pear brandy, half an ounce of lemon juice, half an ounce of honey syrup, and some hard apple cider to top it off. And of course, garnish with an apple. Follow along as I mix it up. And let's get started with the mixer. This time around, we are making what is called a spiced apple fizz. You should have seen the ingredients list before we got here. If not, roll back a little bit and then you put it all together. And when you do, right, got our handy dandy shaker, in go all of those ingredients. Shake, 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 right? Shake, shake, shake. And in it goes into the highball glass. And then we're going to top it off with, I've got some dry hard cider. Let me see if I can get it in here. This is from Seattle. This is the Seattle Cider Company. And off we go then to top that off. And let's go ahead and put a garnish on it this time. I am using up some of my fall cherries with some. So there you go. And that's a spiced apple fizz. Let's go join Shannon and start our discussion for today. We're together again and we're talking this time. It's multi-threading. It's that whole personas conversation that's been hot for, I don't know, 3 months, maybe longer. And we've been having the discussion about how to set up your learner personas in a way that makes sense and may or may not tie to the personas that you've leveraged in the pre-sales and sales cycle once we get post sales. And the structure that brought this conversation today is because multi-threading has been such a big part of my discussions with customer success teams and people online and in person over the last, I don't know, same amount of time, maybe 3-4 months. It's just been a heavy discussion about how do you make sure that customers don't churn because you weren't paying attention to the right signals from the right people within that organization. And when we were talking about it, Shannon and I were talking about it as it relates specifically to what we do with customer education and customer marketing, and how that plays then with health scores, right? How do we get that in there? How does it, how do we do it? How do we manage that same concept from an education or a marketing perspective when we're more focused on users and learners than we may be people outside that particular group? So where do you get started? How do we start with it?
And we're talking more education than customer marketing.
Well, I think it applies in both places, but I think that the conversation started from education. Yeah.
Yeah. So, man, I think we always start with this like one size fits all approach to like, how do you use the platform? How do you use our product? What is it that you do? And then as we grow, we start to think a little bit more about who are those different types of users, right? Like there's your everyday admin, and then there's other, I don't know, like there's so many different types of tools and technology out there that it's hard to know what they're all called, right? Like you might have admins, restricted admins, viewers, editors, collaborators. You know, you might have all these different types of personas who are on there that what they need and what they're trying to accomplish is very different. And so like I don't know, your IT person who's going in there as an admin maybe needs to know a little bit more of the settings and configuration, or your editor person needs to know, like I'm just thinking, I'm trying to think what's a good tool. It's an example. Like when I worked for Litmus, they have, sorry.
Go ahead. No.
Oh, when I work for Litmus, you have like your everyday person who's running email tests, but then you might also have designers, email designers, developers, and then you might have reviewers. You might have like a boss or someone else who's previewing the email, previewing the design, the copy before it goes live. So you have all these different people who need to learn different things. Like the person who's reviewing an email, very little that you have to learn. But the person who's building the email, designing the email, there might be things that they have to learn. Here's where you can find this, here's where you can find that. Here's how you can run spam filter checks. Here's how you can test against different email clients. If you run into this problem, head on over to the community because you've got snippets of code to help you code for dark mode. Like there's all these different things that you can learn, but it's so different kind of depending on who you are. Because I don't know, like, is that what you're kind of hearing when you're
Yeah, and that's and my breakdown is pretty similar to that, right? It's the casual user is the people who don't do it every day. They are an approver, right? They go in and they approve something, or they on occasion have to do something for their job, but it's an infrequent task,
Mhm.
right? And that's where in-app stuff really works best, right? I've
Yep.
got it, the directions are there, it tells me what I need, and it gives me the right code to put in that blank and all that kind of stuff. And then we have
Mhm.
power users, right? And
Mhm.
that is the place where the roles can be significantly different from one to the next because your product may have all of those types of people that you just mentioned, right? And then there's the configurator administrators, right? The people who implement or flip switches on the back end to give users permissions. They create the new users. They may design what your screens look like and brand them appropriately or not, right? All of that kind of stuff happens. And those three groups are the ones that kind of are the baseline. And of course, within that, you can subdivide them as ever appropriate for the type of product that you have so that you can give them what they need, right? That's the
Mhm.
personalization that we've been talking about and that everybody should get through learning paths and all of those other things from an education perspective. But then when we start to talk about it from a multi-threading,
Mhm.
the focus is really on being able to hit all of those people
Mhm.
where they are with what they need, number one,
Mhm.
but also from that customer marketing perspective, it helps, I think, doesn't it, to have the same construct that we would have in a pre-sales environment for marketing, where we are trying to make sure that all of the people who touch the product or make decisions about the product are aware of what people are using the product to do,
Mhm.
right? Which don't we don't spend a lot of time on in general post sales.
Mhm. Like
I
thinking
don't
about.
think even in success, right?
Mhm. Yeah, that's I think feel like over the years when I hear multi-threading, it's this idea of like you can't have a single point of failure. And if your account manager, customer success manager is meeting with one person who's the primary relationship owner for this like platform, then if they leave, like you've effectively lost your champion. Now someone else is coming in who probably doesn't know the product, doesn't have any brand loyalty. Maybe they come in and they've used something else in the past and they're comparing your product to that versus like if you can get more people into the product, more people adopting it, more people who are familiar with it, you're building that. We talked before in the last episode about like building trust, and building that brand loyalty. Like now you have more people who are aware, right? And I think that's, if we just think about like what is the average customer journey right now, most of our customers are going to change jobs. Like a solid portion of
At
them
least
are
once.
going to change jobs and go somewhere else. Now that's a great thing for customer marketing because we can leverage those people that like champion change to get into new companies. But then if we don't have a person who's like backfilling that person, if we haven't built other relationships, like now the account that they left is at risk. So like maybe we gain one, but we might lose one in the process. And so how are we building relationships with these different types of people, the ones who use our platform? And then I think also from like a customer marketing, customer success perspective, we're also thinking about that executive sponsor buyer persona of how are we engaging that person, whether that's through EDRs or like some motion like that where we're including them in the process and we're thinking about how do we engage with this particular persona who doesn't use the product. They're not in there every day. They don't really care about features and functionality, but they care about how is this impacting my business. And then we're starting to think differently about how do we
Well,
communicate and engage with these different people.
right, that's where caps come in, right? That's where we can leverage the idea of the advisory board at the executive level to pull in, I don't know, senior directors through C-suite people to have the conversations, because the benefits at that level are different, as are the triggers that we would need, right? Because it's not about using the product unless they're an approver, right? Unless they're one of the people that has to go in and say, I saw this, I signed off on it, kind of thing. But past that, it really is about making them aware of how we are impacting their numbers in a positive way, hopefully, right? So that we can say that your team is using our product and this is the benefit that we're seeing them have, right?
Yeah.
So
And
I think,
that's mhm.
go ahead.
Oh, just thinking about like who are these different people that we're interacting with. So in the same way marketing is looking at buyer personas and they might message differently, we're thinking about like what are your learning needs and objectives? What is it that you're trying to accomplish in the product? What is it that you need to know about? How do we build and nurture this relationship with you? And then, a persona we haven't really talked about is like new admins. I'm a huge fan of thinking like first time implementation admin and then a new admin, because someone who's coming in to a platform that already exists, they need orientation to who you are, what your product does, why maybe your company bought it, how they can use it, but they don't need all the implementation stuff because the implementation is already done. And so thinking about, but we often forget that too, of like there's actually this like rotating door of people. It's not just the admins like who originally came in, it's the people who come in afterward. How are we building relationship with them, training them, engaging those people like on an ongoing basis, not just kind of, yeah, categorically.
Well, and I was mentioning today that one of the things that I like to watch is with an account is when people change.
Hmm.
So when someone new joins a team, or there's a new LinkedIn post that says, I just became the new person at company X,
Company,
and you
yeah.
go, oh, right, I need to be paying attention. And again, AI is your friend for those kinds of access points, even if you're using other tools that do something similar, if not exactly the same. ChatGPT can, an agent can go in and just pull all of that. And when customer is mentioned, you can see what's going on and understand when a new and how that can alter the behavior, because they are like an X user, not your user. They've been using that other tool forever and they're going to change to their tool. Unless you can get in there right away and explain how things are working well enough right now that you don't need to go there, give it a minute to see.
Mm-hmm.
Give us some time to prove ourselves before you switch. And
Okay.
we can do that, right? We can support, again, success in that effort, in understanding what's going on and how we're able to give the the learners and users the knowledge they need to be sticky, right?
Mm-hmm. So maybe let's talk about that, like operationally, how do customer education, customer marketing support this idea of multi-threading?
It's been on my mind for the last couple of weeks on how we can really build the program to do that. And I think some of it starts with alignment of personas and
Mm-hmm.
understanding that if we're if we're going to spend the time to figure out what the customer life cycle looks like, we need to figure out how those personas hand off post sale in the same way that we are theoretically, and I know not everyone does this, but in the same way that we hand off to customer success and say, now it's your account, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've everybody signed on the dotted line, they've docu-signed away their life, and now we have a new customer and we're going to start whatever that process looks like. How do we then properly resegment those people that were a part of the sales process
Mm-hmm.
into the post-sales personas that we would be working with? And I think that's another part where sometimes silos get in the way
Mm-hmm.
because we've not traditionally paid attention from a learner's persona to the user persona to the sales persona that they were initially before we got them into our realm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there you need to spend some time really figuring out how you're going to message those groups as they move into the post-sales environment. And that's where marketing can play in, right? That's a really smart place to leverage customer marketing because in all hope, it's a one-to-many kind of situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is happening frequently enough that it shouldn't be exclusive to the CSM to manage that content in so much as it is for them to manage the account, right? We want them to be the strategic partner for the customer, not the individual marketer for the customer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that, and maybe that's the thing is like, right, we talk a lot about customer education and customer marketing being functions of scale that we can identify users within an account at scale, right? Which really they're all in the product. Like they're all in your they're all in your product, but we don't necessarily always interface with them. Like I know for some of our accounts, one account might have thousands of users like that like within that account. So like obviously the account manager is not connecting with all of those people, and then we're thinking about, well, how do we scale engagement, because we need to be communicating with each of these people, educating, training each of these people, building relationships with all these people, right? Because you never know like who's going to train the next person or who's going to leave or who's going to be a champion. And so I like to think of a lot as like air cover of like, hey, we can build relationships at scale where customer success could just never do it. And then figuring out like where are those relationships where customer success really needs to be one-on-one, whether that's like a program owner, primary admin, champion person, or those executive sponsor buyer personas. But even there, like they may only have occasional in real life touch points with these people.
Mhm.
And we can be thinking about how do I regularly, consistently communicate? Because that's something I think I've always thought about from a marketing perspective is marketing is a lot about consistency and building trust. And so if I'm not regularly communicating with people, whatever that looks like, and like providing value to them, like they just aren't building a relationship with me, and I'm like leaving it to chance and like fingers crossed you like you figure things out or you like the product or whatever. But I think being more intentional. Yep.
And this, I think, too, is where customer marketing and product marketing become close friends too, right? Because a lot of the communication in traditional role, not power user role, are getting may be getting some of their information from product marketing, from a newsletter, from a
Hmm.
webinar, from something.
Sure.
And we need to be in lockstep, I think, with what's happening message wise from product marketing in the same way we do on the customer side,
Hmm.
because those messages should be very close to the same,
Hmm.
if not the same.
Yeah,
So I think,
it's making me think this is like it's about breaking down silos on our side and the customer's side of how do we just like open the channels of communication for everybody instead of just Yeah, maybe those primary personas that we tend to interact with are those primary users of our product, like actually thinking more expansively about everybody in the ecosystem, not just small little portion.
And I think it speaks back to as well the construct that we talked about about people moving around, right? Because when someone leaves, a lot of the time they're going to look within their existing ecosystem to find someone to replace them. And if we have already been interacting with them in the one-to-many type of situation, whether that's learning opportunities or newsletters that come out or community engagement in some way, shape, or form, then we can also turn that into an introductory opportunity to the CS team, right? We could say, "Oh, look, Carla took over for Jamie, and we know Carla already. Here, let me introduce you to Carla."
Yeah. Um, trying to think, we talked about, okay, what is this concept of like multi-threading, personas, personalization? How can customer education, customer marketing support? Is there anything else we should touch on?
Measures.
Measures. Okay.
How do we measure it?
How do we measure? That's a great question. How how are you thinking about measuring it, Kristine?
I think that we start here in the same way that we would start with all of the others when we focus on actually trying to find something. The first time that we do it, we have to figure out what the counts look like. We just have to start doing things and keeping track of what we're doing and what behavior happens after we do this thing. And it's all counting in numbers and saying we sent out 700 of these things or 700,000 of these things, and from there we got this kind of behavior. We saw these kinds of things happen. We got these Our CTAs went this route, right? We were able to get people to do these other things. And then from there, we can then start the trend analysis to see where we need to find the gaps that either education can solve or that marketing can solve. Maybe it's time to differentiate tab, right? Some organizations think of customer advisory boards as a product advisory board. All
Mm-hmm.
they're really there to do is talk about the product and the advancement of the product. Some of
Mm-hmm.
them think of them as an executive level activity, which is not the advancement of the product, but the
Mm-hmm.
advancement of the business,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's, for me, that's a very distinct difference. But maybe it's time to start focusing on separating those out into the idea of being able to multi-thread more effectively, right? Because if we're talking about business, we can involve executive members more effectively than we can if we're talking about product, right? So we get a chance to, I'm not saying one is any more important than the other. I'm saying that you need to analyze where you are and which of those techniques is going to be best served by the construct that you have. If we're really focused on multi-threading, we need to be able to provide opportunities for all of the levels of contact that we need to touch in an organization. And if we ignore the executive level because they already signed the check, we're ignoring at our own peril.
I believe that. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I wonder if it's not like, I think of metrics as like, did we do it? Did we not do it? Right? Is sometimes a metric. And if you're thinking about, are we engaging people? Because ultimately, kind of like with product adoption, if people are using our product, if they're using more of our product, they are more likely to stay. That's going to be true most of the time. Obviously, there are times that that's not true. Like an executive comes in and replaces everything with their own tech stack, or something happens to the business, right? Like those are things that you can't control. But generally speaking, if you're using a product a lot and you're using it like the breadth, the depth of the product, then you're more likely to stay. This is just pretty universally true. And I think you'd say the same of Like there is risk in not being connected to your executive sponsor and the buyer on a recurring basis. And there's a risk to only having one point of contact or only like a few points of contact in an organization. We have got to figure out how we scale our relationships with customers, in customers of all types, right? Like those different types of users, different types of accounts. And we're thinking more of that like scaled engagement strategy. And then
Exactly.
do we have it or do we not? So to your point of, are we engaging executives at all? Because what we're trying to do is like mitigate risk. And so maybe the success measure is just risk mitigation, which is almost like legal. Like, why do you have a legal team? Does the legal team prove ROI? Not necessarily, but they keep your butt from getting into trouble. Or like, so I think sometimes that's it. It's like risk mitigation alone, or the account retention that we know is more likely because we have those relationships. Like that is the goal versus, because sometimes I think we want to put like a measure on it so we can have it on a dashboard and everybody can be like, yeah, we drove revenue. But it's like, I don't know that that's always going to drive revenue, but it's going to lower your risk. And that has value too.
Because lower risk means less churn.
Yes. Should mean less churn. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So our recap, Kristine.
So what does it mean? Multi-threading is the construct of user personas, right? And understanding what your users are doing, who they are, and how many different levels you need to be touching at scale, right? Because again, individually CS has it covered, but at scale, what can we do to support that effort? And then how does it work is just that, right? It's identifying what they are and how we can benefit them in their work that they do, but also in the way that we are able to touch individuals that success may not see because we teach hundreds of thousands of people within the organization or within that particular user type, right? Whether they're casual users or power users. We're reaching lots more people from an education perspective than success could ever hope to touch. And through that, we can encourage behaviors, right? We can encourage connections for things that just don't happen otherwise. And then measuring, again, we're not tackling new measurements at all. What we're doing is refining the measurements we already have at scale so that we can show that education and marketing play a role in my passion project retention, right? And that's what multi-threading does for us. Is it allows us to not prevent churn because you can't, but it does allow us to control what happens with churn
Mhm.
and to understand that some churn is unavoidable for the reasons that Shannon stated earlier, right? The acquisitions. Somebody came in and said, my tech stack is better than I'm going to always bring my favorite vendors with me wherever I go. And there's nothing you can really do about that.
Mm-hmm.
As unfortunate, other than make your own people that do that for you too.
Mm-hmm.
And so that structure is pretty much the same. So that I think that really covers it. Is we don't make up new metrics. We just leverage the metrics that we already have to prove that this works, right? That we can multi-thread it at scale.
Mm-hmm.
There's our tagline, right? Multi-thread at scale.
I think that's the only way you can do it, really. Well, that's not true. You could go after people individually. It's just like anything. Like there's only so many things that any one person can do. And that's customer education, customer marketing, your friends in scale.
So we're good here. Comment below any success you have, any hints you need. We'll be happy to chat with you about it, and we will see you next time.